Go into a little fermentation that a lot of people helped produce today. So thank you to Justine for sourcing the passion fruit. These came from a farm in, what's the town? Homestead. Homestead. There's a big farm there, and they have passion fruit, which is in season. So these were organic or naturally farmed. Justine literally picked them off a tree. Thank you for that. And then Zwan and Bianca for sourcing the star fruit. This is also from a tree from Bianca's friend's backyard. And it's cool. We've never worked with star fruit. We've worked a little bit with passion fruit, but it was cool to come here and listen to farmers and listen to friends about what fruits are in season and what could be fermentable to do this workshop. And then also just we can pass this around. People can taste this. This is something that I learned today. It's Suriname cherry, or what Bianca called as Barbados cherries, and they're found all around Miami. And this is definitely something that could also be fermentable. So just to throw something out there for people to get a visual representation. It has a pit inside of it. And so what we have, so a big part of Ashanti wines, we do big cuvées of vinifera, but we also do these really small micro projects, and that all comes from foraging and just from living out in the country and also living in urban spaces. And it's kind of, I feel like once you become a winemaker, you can never unsee fruit or unsee vines. And my lovely partner Will has really helped me start to see this whole literally Garden of Eden that's above our heads, because he's the plant identifier in the family. And our first forage fermentation really began with elderberries, which came from the San Gabriel Mountains, and that was our first foray going into non-vinifera fruit. But within that, it kind of gave confidence to experiment with all these other fruits that exist. And it's fascinating. Definitely, I think sometimes the most fulfilling fermentations that we have is when you discover a fruit above your head, and then you spend grueling days in the hot sun picking it, and then you can turn it into something magical. And we've seen a lot of examples of those today, actually. So this is, I guess, the really beginning part of how that happens. So this is mostly star fruit, they're 70% star fruit, 30% guava. Star fruit is a tree. It comes from Southeast Asia, has made its way across the Pacific to here. It grows well in tropical regions, and that's why it's in Florida. It's been around for a while. And then we also have passion fruit, which is here. This is a berry. What you usually eat inside the passion fruit is actually the seeds and the pulp of it. And passion fruit is also a vine as well. To kind of put in perspective, it has similar components to a grape, but it's a massive berry. It's one of the biggest berries out there. So a little bit about how we just simply process. This is an Omega food processor from Bed Bath & Beyond. Basic household item, doesn't take up too much space, and it's a way for if someone is in Miami or even just across the states and sees fruit that they want to work with and just wants to have a go at fermentation. This is a way to really do that in a small scale, and then just you have a gallon carboy that you can sit on your counter. And so what we did here was I chopped the I can project quite loudly if I want to. So what we do is we chop the star fruit, turn this on, you just press it, and eventually juice to start coming out. Does anyone want to try the fresh star fruit juice? Yes. I think it's really interesting to taste things before they turn into wine, and you can really kind of see these components. But it's very tart. It has pretty low sugars. It has about 8 bricks, so this won't be a high alcohol wine. The passion fruit can go up to 15 bricks, which is why we're adding that. Something that we usually always do are co-ferments, or we usually always do co-ferments, especially when we're working with fruits, one to raise volume, but also to raise sugars.
Chenoa, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us what bricks are?
It's the level of sugar that exists in a fruit. And so grapes can go pretty high. They can go into the 30s if you allow them to do that. So just to put that in perspective, star fruit's pretty low in that. And then what's it called? Sorry, passion fruit is a bit higher, and it also has a lot of citric acid in it. And so to kind of balance that out, that's why we also have the star fruit. Also, passion fruit comes from Brazil, Argentina, and has made its way up here. It was actually largely planted around the south of Miami, or in Miami, when colonialism settlers came, and these were all plantations, and a lot of what they were planting was passion fruit. So it definitely has a history when we don't want to talk about slavery and working on plantations, but it remains. And now, like, even in our Airbnb where we're staying, there's a passion fruit tree or vine in our backyard. It's kind of fascinating to see when these plants have traveled so far and have existed for so long, and then they go unused, but they just sprout up in all these places. It's called passion fruit. The Spanish named it that because the flower is actually beautiful, almost looks like an alien, but there's 5 nods in the middle of the flower, and they said that was the symbol of Christ. And they used that, actually the passion fruit was the way that they used to oppress and convert indigenous people to Catholicism, because their fruit represented Christ. So interesting. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my God.
But we're here now, and we're reclaiming it, and that's what matters. And obviously there was a name for passion fruit that existed for this. But here's a little, if anyone wants to try just has anyone had star fruit juice? No. Well, here's a little tip. Okay. And you can also, star fruit, you can also eat the skin.
Here, my friend can have some. You guys tell me about it. Oh my goodness. You're professionals. This is tasty.
So just think about that, and then, like, as food, it's gonna be delicious.
So good.
And something we also really like to do with our fruit co-ferments is we like to turn them into pet nats. I mean, it's twofold. I think I like the effervescence usually with these sort of low sugar fruits. I think it's a nice kind of balance with it, and then also just the preservation. The lower alcohol levels you have, the more likely you can get bacteria. CO2 is a really good way to protect the wines and seal it, especially since we are adding any CO2 in the process. And I'm sure people have tried guava, right? Or sorry, passion fruit. But you want that? How many people here are based in Miami?
Oh, Miami local.
I am now.
Have you seen these fruits around? Yeah. Quite a bit. Yeah.
I saw some growing wildly on South Beach.
The passion fruit?
Yeah.
Do people like ever pick them and eat them?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Cool. Yeah, there's an abundance of it. I think it'd be really cool for people to play with that more. And then you can also pass this around if anyone wants to taste, like, it in its actual form. The berries and the star fruit.
Okay.
And the point of this is, like, you taste your fruit, you taste your food before you, or like when you cook, sometimes you taste things, right? And it's the same thing with winemaking. Is like we taste our fruit to make sure it tastes good before we process it. If it has bacteria in it, if it has mold on it, if it feels like it's rotting, it's not going to turn into a good wine. And so, and we're also, we're dealing with just forage fruit is coming from untamed elements, but also within that, we have found that they have been our most robust and healthy fermentations because they're not being sprayed if there's any chemicals, and it could be residual from just runoff and what's being around, but they're not being watered, and so their roots are really, really deep, and they're going deep into the ground. They're creating a lot of characteristics and structure and profile, and it's amazing to be able to showcase that with something like star fruit or passion fruit or guavas, which we work with, or elderberry, because they are also ancient to this land and have traveled all over, and to be able to taste something with also the same amount of history that exists with the vine is fascinating, because they have those
basically after we process this, like pour it into here, and it's actually starting to ferment already. You can kind of see with the bubbles. This will eventually, through fermentation, start to clarify, and you'll see a lot of the sediment drop. Right here is actually a good example of knowing what's happening right now. So this is pushing CO2, and you can see in the airlock that it's pushing the water up. And this is like a very kind of simple way to measure if your fermentation is going or not. And when it's pushing a lot of CO2, this will just be like gurgling and bubbling. It's literally like this life flowing. And then as I was talking about bricks earlier, this is a hydrometer. It's actually like pretty medieval technology. But I don't have to show the whole process unless people really want to see this.
Do it. Show me the way.
But this is how we're going to measure essentially what the sugar level of this is at, and this is how you can. We usually measure it every day, and that's how you watch how quickly it's fermenting. Ideally, you don't want it to ferment too quickly. It's like if you like cook a tomato sauce way too fast, it's going to be like burnt and not good. But you also don't want it to take too long where it starts stalling out. And for us, it's just a visual nod because we don't really add that much. If we really need to fix something, we'd probably just be adding more fermenting juice. And these break all the time.
Teamwork.
Also, this is really important if you're doing pet naps, because we usually like to bottle when our fermentation has dropped to 1.5 bricks, and this will measure that for you. So right now, let's see. Yeah, it's really thick. This is about 10, so it's going to be really light. And how to measure what the alcohol level would be, you would multiply that usually by 0.59. So this would probably be like 6%.
Each one. What did it start at?
10.
Oh, 10.
Yeah, I just took it right now. Any questions? Anyone want to babysit this fermentation and see how this project plays out? I tried to read a little bit about scientific experimentations with star fruit. Very little. Some people have tried it down in Brazil, but they always added yeast, but they said it was a viable fruit to be fermented. And same with passion fruit. I did not read anything about a passion fruit and star fruit co-fermentation. I'm sure it's existed before, but otherwise this could be really fun for someone to take home and see how it evolves. Yes.
Is there a fruit that you would like to ferment that you haven't?
Fruit that I would like to ferment that I haven't. That's a good question. I mean, it was
For
star
both
fruit.
of you.
I think after reading more what was in season here, star fruit became really interesting because you see it around. Like I was just in Mexico, and you see it around there, but it's not something that we really like eat back in California. And then I feel like I became more confident in like biting into it last night. I was like, okay, let me just bite into this thing and see what it's like. And we all sat around a table and we're just like dripping with it falling out, all the juice falling down our faces, and it tasted like Pez candies, dispenser candies.
Oh, weird.
But I don't know.
So, last conversation with John A. I really want to try potatoes.
I was gonna say
Yeah?
Yeah, so I'm really thinking about potatoes because if we're talking about things that grow everywhere, potatoes, and every culture has their own, especially like a sweet variety. Initially, I was like, if you compare an apple and a potato, if you can't smell anything, they kind of taste the same. So similar starches and some sugars, but without the sweetness of it. So I'm thinking like some kind of co-ferment with something really, maybe like maybe an apple and potato. I don't know. Maybe like I don't know why I'm thinking mango, but mango and white potato, or like, and we could get into sweet potatoes and like taro, things that already have the sugars in them. And I have no idea how it would taste, or if it would work, or what it would need. But in terms of like the dialogue that ABB is all about, So that's something that I want to try. I just feel like I need a bigger lab for all the things that are running through my head. Yeah.
I do want to open it up to see if anybody needs any clarification or has any technical questions in the safest of spaces for these two right here. They're some of the most experimental winemakers in our community, and I really encourage you, even if not in front of everyone, kind of to pick their brains to pull some inspiration if you're curious. So I just want to open that up if anyone has any questions. Okay, cool. And then I just also, and I said this to Chenoa a couple of days ago, but I want to share it with everyone because I think that we're kind of wired to look for a precedent, and if it's not there, then we think it's not viable. And I was speaking with a colleague of mine in Amsterdam, and he said something that was profound to me last week, and I shared it with Noah, and I'd like to share it with all of you, which is that white academia is at odds with indigenous storytelling, stewardship, and history. And that is to say, a lot of our cultures participate in oral history, in storytelling. It's communal. We pass information down. So just because it's not written, or just because something else is written, does not mean that what we know is false. It does not mean that what we dream is not viable. So I just really want to share that just because it hasn't been written yet does not mean that it's not valid. Thank you. Thank you, guys.